Okay, we are live with Alexander Mercouris in London. Alexander, how are you doing this Saturday morning?
I'm doing very well. I'm very, very pleased to be on this program, and we're going through momentous hours. I think these are important events, actually. I don't agree with the view, just to quickly anticipate that this was a know-nothing summit, a nothing burger, or anything like that. I think that misunderstands the dynamic completely. But we'll be discussing all this more detail in the program.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that right away, actually. But first, let me say a quick hello to everyone that is watching us on Odyssey and Rockfin and Rumble and YouTube, as well as our locals chat, theduran.locals.com. How is everyone doing in the locals chat? A good morning to all, and a good morning, good day to our moderators as well, Zarael and Valies and Peter. And I think those are our moderators for the moment. How is everyone doing in the YouTube chat, as well as the Rumbles chat and Rockfin, Odyssey? All right, everyone is here, Alexander, and we're going to talk about the Alaska summit, break it all down. Next time is in Moscow, as Putin told Trump in English. So the Istanbul Plus agreement capitulation will be signed in Moscow. Is that where we're heading towards? The breaking news, Alexander, is that Trump was speaking to the Europeans, to NATO, as well as to Zelensky on the plane trip back to D.C. And Zelensky will be heading to the White House tomorrow. Very convenient of him to be in London. I don't know if that was coincidence, maybe not, but he will be in DC. And according to Axios and their sources, Trump told the Europeans and Zelensky on the phone call that Russia is looking for a peace agreement, a comprehensive settlement to the conflict in Ukraine, and not a ceasefire. And then Trump posted on Truth Social pretty much what Axios was reporting. So he pretty much confirmed Axios is reporting. And to me, that signals Istanbul Plus. My sense of things are that Putin and his team, they sat down with Trump and his team, and they explained the situation. Most importantly, they explained the military situation. I'm sure they explained the economic situation, the sanctions situation, how nothing is working with all of the sanctions. I'm sure they went over all of it, the Russian economy, everything. But most importantly, they talked about the situation on the ground, on the front lines, and how catastrophic it is for Ukraine. And Istanbul Plus is still on the table. June 2024 root causes. That has not changed from June 2024. So that's still on the table. And it looks like that is what Trump discussed with the Europeans and with Ukraine. So, Alexander, your sense of things.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely correct. And I think you summarized the situation absolutely clearly. A few quick things to say. Reports in London are suggesting that this call between Trump, the European leaders, and Zelensky was a very difficult one. They weren't happy. And it's unsurprising that they were not happy, because for the last couple of months, ever since March, they've all been singing the same hymn, which is that they want a unconditional ceasefire along the existing front lines. Now, the Russians have never agreed to that. When it was first proposed to them by Trump on the 18th of March, Putin responded. If you remember, he said that there were all these nuances, that there were all these problems. He wanted an end to all sorts of military supplies to the Ukrainians, intelligence assistance, all that kind of thing. And of course, that was not something the Americans, the Ukrainians, or the Europeans were prepared to agree to. But an unconditional, a ceasefire of any kind, which could very easily evolve into a freeze of the conflict, was never what the Russians ever wanted. The Russians now are in an extremely strong position. Their military is breaking through in Donbass. The situation on the front lines is catastrophic for Ukraine. There are articles in the British media that are now admitting as much. The Daily Telegraph published an article yesterday saying that Ukraine has lost and Russia has won. That is an astonishing thing for the British media to admit. And by the way, if you went to the thread and read the shock on the part of some of the readers who've obviously been told something completely different for the last 3.5 years, well, I mean, you can just probably guess how profound that shock was.
Being lied to, the readers
being lied
to for 3 years.
Being lied to, and being in denial about it, and unable to cope with the information and the news and all of that. So anyway, the military situation is catastrophic. And as we've discussed, as I went into great detail to explain on my channel, the makeup of the Russian team that Putin brought with him to Alaska made it absolutely clear what Putin was there to talk about. Obviously, the military situation, about which the Americans are fairly well informed already, one must assume, but also the realities about the Russian economy, the fact that the sanctions are not working in the way that the Europeans insist they are, and the way Zelensky constantly talks they are, the way that some people, Lindsey Graham, are pretending in the United States. That is why Anton Siluanov, the Russian finance minister, was there, because he knows more about the sanctions in Russia than almost anyone else. He was there to explain to the Americans, to Scott Bessent, who was also there, the US Treasury Secretary, who is in charge of sanctions. The sanctions originate from within the Treasury, and they're enforced by the Treasury, the US Treasury. So Siluanov was there to explain to the Americans, look, these sanctions, these tariffs that you're talking about, Lindsey Graham's blockbuster, bone-crunching sanctions bill, not only are they not going to work, not only are they not going to crush our economy, they risk crushing yours instead. They will inflate oil and energy prices. They will trigger further inflation. They will cause many more problems for you. So this is why the Russians agreed to this meeting in Alaska. It was to explain all this in person to the Americans. That's why the meeting was much shorter than people anticipated, because the Americans, to some extent, know this already. This is why Donald Trump, again, was so careful to say, this is not my war, it's Joe Biden's war. I didn't get America into this mess. This is why Vladimir Putin was so careful over the course of his press conference to say the same thing. If I'd been talking with Donald Trump, who is somebody who listens, we would never have got into this mess in the first place. It was Biden and the people in Europe who launched us into this economic war with all the disastrous consequences that we can see. That is the subtext of it. And Putin told the Americans, ceasefires really aren't the solution here. We need a comprehensive settlement. We need to go to the root causes of the problem. He used those very words in that short press conference. They're all there. It's distilled, single, clear paragraph. We need the root causes to be addressed. We need Russia's security interests to be addressed. We need a situation that restores balance to the situation, balance and security to the situation in Europe, and by the way, globally as well. So translate that, Istanbul Plus. This is what Putin said. This is the basis upon which this crisis can be negotiated and settled. Maybe we can negotiate on the edges of certain things. Territory isn't the key issue, however. Security is the key issue. That is why the war happened. Trump listened. Trump understood this. I think Scott Bessent, who, by the way, said an incredibly tough thing to the Europeans before the summit. He said, why are you harping on sanctions all the time? If you want to do something, just go ahead and do it. Otherwise, put up or shut up. Extraordinarily strong language addressed to the Europeans by the US Treasury Secretary, gone almost entirely unreported in Europe, by the way. That must have been a shock. So a comprehensive settlement, Istanbul plus is the only basis upon which the Russians are going to settle. The Americans are coming round to that idea. Trump told the Europeans and Zelensky there has to be a comprehensive settlement. The Russians have set out the framework. There is no other way to end this thing. The only other way is to see the war continue and have a geopolitical disaster on your hands. And we don't want that. You shouldn't want that either. The Europeans are furious about this. Zelensky, whose entire political position depends on the war continuing, is in shock and deep anger. And he's been, I think, told to come to Washington to meet Trump, where Trump will lay it out for him, laid out to him person to person, and will explain it to him in ways that perhaps just possibly Zelensky might begin to understand. Having said that, Zelensky himself is never going to agree to this. We're going to see him push back in every possible way that he can. As Alex correctly said, it was not a coincidence he went to London. He's got Keir Starmer basically in his pocket. He's going to try and get the British to make trouble. He's going to try to get the Europeans to make trouble. Putin warned against this in the press conference. He said, I hope the Europeans will take a constructive approach, that they won't engage in provocations and intrigues. We know that they are going to be obstructive, provocative, and are going to engage in intrigues. But they cannot change the realities on the ground or the wider economic and geopolitical picture. Everything is now played out. And I don't know that the peace agreement is going to be signed in Moscow. I would have thought that would be a bit too much. But we are heading towards a comprehensive peace, which is and can only be Istanbul plus. So that's my summary of the situation, which is basically,
which is basically yours. The terms. Medvedev said that Russia's going to dictate the terms. So
exactly.
Why not Moscow?
Why not? Moscow?
We'll see. We will see. But the Europeans sidelined, Alexander, completely sidelined. They're talking about European stability and security. Without the Europeans there, they must be absolutely furious with this development.
Absolutely. Of course they are, but who's brought that about? Who's brought that on themselves? The Europeans have. What have we been saying on the Duran ever since Donald Trump became president? The Europeans could have been talking to the Russians. They could have sent their foreign ministers or their representatives to Moscow to meet with Putin and Lavrov. They could have come up with intelligent and realistic proposals, counter proposals of their own. They never did any of those things. We had one call from Macron to Putin, which was basically a long, aggressive lecture, which Putin obviously dismissed and rejected. There was talk some months ago of appointing a special representative to represent the Europeans in the discussions. Kaja Kallas, of all people, said it should be her. Everybody else said no. Macron then appointed himself. And he's done nothing. He's done absolutely nothing. And Merz instead has been talking all the time about more sanctions and arms build-ups, which nobody takes seriously. And there's been an incredible admission on Times Radio, pointed out to me by a member of the Duran community, in which apparently a British official told a journalist of the Times last year that Ukraine is losing. And there is nothing that we can do about it. This is a British official telling the Times. And what did the British do? Despite the fact that they know that Ukraine is losing the war, they've been doing everything they possibly can to prolong the war, making Ukraine's defeat even more certain. I mean, this is moral and diplomatic bankruptcy of a kind that I could never have imagined.
Yeah, keep the Americans in. That's what it's all about.
That's what
they're ready to sacrifice all of Ukraine, and all of the Ukrainian soldiers and the people in order to keep the Americans in and to keep the money flowing. That's what it's all about for the Europeans.
Absolutely.
That's it. They are going to do whatever they have to do to keep the United States invested in Europe and invested in NATO. Trump has been given the perfect off ramp to this. Putin was masterful.
Yes.
I mean, the entire Russian delegation did a great job, but the U.S. delegation did a great job.
Yes. Yes.
We have to say it. Trump did a great job because through the 6 months of flip-flopping and buying into Keith Kellogg and Lindsey Graham and listening to all these guys, they tried everything. Everything failed. And Trump got the meeting, and now he's put himself in a position after discussing things with Putin and getting a clear picture of the situation. He's put himself in a position where he can now call Zelensky to the White House, which is what he's doing. He is summoning Zelensky to the White House, and he can tell Zelensky, if he plays his cards right, he may not do this. I don't know. He may flip-flop back again to the Kellogg position. I can't say with 100% certainty on this, but if he plays his cards right, which I believe he will, we'll find out Monday, Tuesday. He calls Zelensky into the White House, and he tells Zelensky, it's Istanbul plus. Maybe there's some small changes here and there, but I don't think it will be anything substantive.
No.
But he's going to say, here's Istanbul plus. It's been on the table since June 2024. Sign this deal. If Zelensky and the Europeans and NATO say no, then Trump has the perfect excuse to completely walk away from this.
Yes.
If he doesn't take it, then, what can we say anymore?
Exactly.
If Zelensky signs it, then it's a complete and clear victory for Russia, and they can get to business with the United States as well.
Absolutely. And by the way, just to quickly add, if Istanbul Plus happens, obviously it's the end of Zelensky, and probably, and I think this is what the Russians expect, and it's what more and more people are expecting, you're going to see a pendulum swing in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians themselves will start to seek some kind of rapprochement. But this is a topic we can discuss in future programs. I think, again, you're absolutely correct. You summarize it exactly. I'm going to say something else. Kellogg was kept away from Alaska. The Russians didn't want him there, but they were not in a position to insist that he would not come. The fact that he was not there is a sign that he's out of favor, that Donald Trump didn't want him there either, because he could have been there in Alaska as part of the expert team. I wondered whether he might be. He wasn't on the ground. He was kept well away. So Kellogg is not wanted. He's served his purpose. And here I'm going to say something else. It's absolutely clear now that there have been far more contacts and discussions between the Americans and the Russians than we know about. The Americans have been talking to the Russians in private. I would love to know who was involved. I'm going to make a guess that Witkoff has played a significant role. Notice that there was a long period when he seemed to drop out of the news. I wonder whether he wasn't having private discussions with the Russians in various venues. Rubio himself appears to have been involved in at least one of them, just to say. And of course, the Americans have also been talking to Lukashenko, and we know all about that now. And of course, Trump telephoned him and basically thanked him, because that's what that telephone call from
the wonder weapon, Lukashenko.
Lukashenko, exactly. The highly respected president of Belarus. Now, again, this is a bit of Trump trolling, because, of course, the Europeans loathe Lukashenko, and this will really stick in their throat. But that's Trump for you, playing play. I mean, he was trolling. The Russians did a little bit of trolling of their own. Chicken Kiev on the plane, Lavrov turning up with a USSR T-shirt and all that. But I mean, there's been a bit of trolling of the Europeans by the Russians, a bit of trolling of the Europeans by the Americans. Again, it's their way, the Americans and the Russians' way of telling the Europeans, look, we're the big adults. We're the real adults. You will do as you're told.
So where do we go from here, Alexandra? And then we'll get to some questions.
Well, there's going to be
Zelensky at first will reject.
Of course he will.
After he's done whining and crying and rejecting all this, and the Europeans the same. When everything settles down, what do you think is going to happen? Well, will they continue to reject it, or
yes,
what?
They will try and reject it for as long as they can. They will try to work with Lindsey Graham. They will try to work with all of these people in Congress. But this is where this summit meeting is important, because I suspect that what they're now going to find is a united U.S. government. I mean, Besant and what's his name, Ludwig,
Lutnick, yeah,
Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary, they were both there. I mean, they will now be able to go to Congress to talk to the people there and say, look, this isn't going to work. Lindsey Graham's big sanctions bill, we've already tried it with India. It didn't work with them. We can't do it with China. The Russians have called this particular bluff. It's not going to work. And as Robert Barnes pointed out, Lindsey Graham is now facing a challenge in the primary, and that's also clearly now making him uncomfortable. So I think that there will be some attempts to get this secondary tariffs and sanctions thing off again. I don't believe it's going to work. I don't think it's going to happen. So the Europeans are going to be left with a choice. Either they go on supporting Zelensky and let the war continue until Ukraine collapses, buying whatever weapons in the United States they can, and causing more and more anger and distress amongst their publics, their European populations. Merz's popularity has plunged to catastrophic levels. The AfD is now the most popular party in Germany, and the same criticism is being made in Germany of Merz, that he's only interested in foreign policy, that is being made about Starmer in London, that he is only interested in foreign policy, and that is code for Ukraine. So they can continue along that road, in which case the Americans will start to distance themselves and will move forward with building up their relationships, their long-term relationships with the Russians. Or they eventually come to terms, they accept the reality, and they agree to Istanbul Plus. Very difficult to do. It's going to mean facing the European populations who have been led to believe completely different things. One of the things that you saw in Europe also, in the British media, even the BBC, their shock at seeing Putin and Trump together in the United States. This is the pariah, the enemy, isolated and all of that, which of course he never has been. But anyway, that's what they've been saying. And now suddenly there he is in the United States. Trump is meeting him. There's the red carpet. There's the fly past. There's all of that. And the Europeans, the British, are furious about that. But what ultimately can they do? So yes, I think they will not like this at all. They will be furious about this. They will be furious also because the degree of their irrelevance has been exposed to them. But they may complain, they may be angry, but their choices are very bad now. Continue the war and lose catastrophically, and have the Russians and the Americans continue their rapprochement in the meantime, or alternatively accept Istanbul Plus. Logically, rationally, they should accept Istanbul Plus, but What Merz and Ursula and Macron and Starmer are really going to do, I have absolutely no idea. We'll see.
Or option number 3, Alexander, Trump flip-flops. He starts agreeing with Lindsey Graham. He starts agreeing with Kellogg again. He escalates. He sends $55 billion to Ukraine.
Yes.
And he loses the war. And it all gets thrown on him. Because as you've noted many times, you have the economic situation, you have the diplomatic situation, you have the sanctions, but it's the events on the ground, the military situation, which dictates everything. And the military situation is going horrifically wrong for Ukraine, NATO, and the collective West. They're getting smashed in Donbass, in Kherson, in Sumy, everywhere. So I mean, that's the other option, of which I'm positive that Trump's advisors have told him, if we continue, we're going to suffer a catastrophic defeat, and it's all going to be placed on you.
Yes. So I agree. I don't think he will go there, but we're dealing with Donald Trump, and
that's an option.
It is an option. He's unpredictable and whatever. I mean, the one thing I would say is that I'm starting to think, and this is perhaps the last point I'm going to make, but I'm starting to think that a lot of the rhetoric we've been hearing coming from Trump over the last couple of weeks, the rhetoric about I'm very disappointed with Putin. I speak to Putin and he's so nice on the phone, and it turns out that he's actually raining down missiles. He's crazy. He's all of those. You remember all of that rhetoric? I'm starting to think that there was an element of misdirection about it, because the Americans and the Russians were talking in private with each other. And I think that Trump, who, despite what people say, is not a fool, very far from being any kind of fool. I think what he wanted to do was he wanted to keep the Europeans concentrated on these comments that he was making, which in the end mean nothing, even as Witkoff or Rubio or whoever it was quietly talking with the Russians and with Lukashenko and was preparing the ground for this meeting. In which case, it's unlikely that Trump will return to any of that, because it might not have been real in the first place. I mean, bear in mind, Trump spoke to Merz and the Europeans and Zelensky on Wednesday. And again, we got all the same sort of mood talk, about I might walk out of the meeting. I'll be very upset if I don't get a ceasefire from the meeting. He was saying all of those things. I mean, I could tell immediately that it was absolute nonsense when he was saying it. They know it. I mean, why call a meeting if you're going to walk out of it immediately? So there was never any chance of that. But again, it gave the Europeans some hope. It produced some headlines in the media in Europe, which were useful and provided cover so that the meeting in Alaska could take place without too much disruption and chaos along the way. So I think that perhaps, as I said, a lot of that rhetoric and that noise that we heard coming out of Washington over the last couple of weeks might have been misdirection all along. I don't think Trump is incapable of doing that, by the way.
Yeah, Robert Barnes went over all of this in the live stream we did last week.
Yeah, exactly.
About what the Trump White House may be doing and the misdirection that may be taking place. So definitely check out that live stream that we did last week with Robert Barnes. He goes over everything in detail as far as what the strategy of the Trump White House may have been, and it looks like that's what was going on. But you know what? We'll have to wait till Tuesday or Monday afternoon, whenever Zelensky flies into DC. Remember the last time Zelensky was at the White House? I hope he's going to wear a suit this time. If he wears a suit, that's how you know it's over. Right? If he wears a suit, you know that it's over.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add, Alexander?
No, I think we've covered it. Let's just say one quick thing. One very last thing. I mean, there's been some attempts to play this all down, to say that this is a nothing burger. It's not. It is not a nothing burger at all, in my opinion. It is a major step forward. It is the first positive recognition that, as the British media is now starting to say, Russia has won the war.
And Orban.
And Orban has said it too.
Who Trump is now speaking with, or he probably has been speaking with.
Well, indeed, I mean, that was another very good point, actually, because clearly Trump and Orban have been talking to each other an awful lot more than we know about, which it surprised me that they didn't seem to have been doing so, given that they're known to get on with each other. But it turns out that they were talking to each other quite a lot.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some questions here. From Nikos, a 5-part question, Alexander. This summit was awesome. Such a badass moment for Putin. He dominated the show from his talk with Trump to his speech and gift to the Alaska church. My favorite part is him trolling the media. You can tell that they all agreed that they wouldn't give a damn about pleasing the media, from Lavrov wearing a CCCP T-shirt to Putin's reaction. The optics were hilarious. My concern is, what did they agree to? I was watching the live in the Geeks and Gamers channel, who is a massive Trump supporter. Reaction to Putin were mixed to positive. From what he could tell, Trump wasn't happy. Now, was this because he agreed to Istanbul Plus and he knows Europe won't accept it, or did Putin concede? I hope that Putin did not concede, because I know a lot of people who are going to be angry either way. Levan, Brian Beletic, Jim Jetras, and Stanislav. He didn't concede anything, Putin. Nothing.
Nothing. He made that absolutely clear in the press conference. I mean, I'll summarize what he said. You can go to the Kremlin's website. You'll find what he said there. He didn't give an inch. And I think this is the important thing to say. I mean, he talked about root causes. He talked about he made it absolutely clear that it is Istanbul Plus, and that alone, nothing else. So he conceded nothing. Alex is absolutely right.
And there's some talk, I think this is originating from The Economist, that there might be some sort of an air ceasefire. Russia's done this before. So even if that is something that's agreed on, and because of maybe for goodwill or something, Russia's been through this before. They've done an air ceasefire. So I don't, if there's going to be some panic about, oh, he's agreeing to an air ceasefire, Russia's done that in the past, right, Alexander?
Absolutely.
And Ukraine broke it,
Ukraine broke it, exactly. And I mean, it's possible they might agree to this. I think if they had, actually,
they would have announced it.
They would have announced it. But I mean, and this is The Economist, the British, by the way, have been very busy over the last couple of days trying to pump out stories in the media that put pressure on the Russians, and they were clearly trying to create trouble. I mean, there was even an article in Reuters sourced supposedly from someone in Russia, a Russian who is close to the Kremlin. I mean, when you hear that, by the way, that's an alarm bell. I mean, that should tell you that this person probably doesn't exist. Anyway, supposedly that the Russians are going to go in and concede to Trump's demands because Trump can't be argued with, and we need to avoid the sanctions.
A person close to the Kremlin, Christopher Steele or someone like that. That's their source.
Exactly.
Oh, all right. Dirk Digler, welcome to the Duran community. Elza says, Putin mentioned security guarantees for Ukraine. Security would be provided best if neocons like Lindsey and their European friends like Bojo would stay away from Ukraine. Very
Absolutely.
True.
Just to make a point about this, the Russians have always said that they do not oppose security guarantees for Ukraine. What they're opposed to is Ukraine's membership of NATO. Now, the Istanbul Agreement, the original one, drawn up in April 2022, which the Ukrainians initialed but walked away from, contained all kinds of security guarantees for Ukraine. And one of the guarantors was Russia. So this has never been a Russian objection. Of course, if you use the expression security guarantees, as, say, Keir Starmer does, to imply NATO, then that is a completely different question.
Yeah. They're not talking about security guarantees. They're talking about NATO entry.
Exactly.
Elza says, there is nothing better than watching history in the making with the Duran. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Elza, for that. Daniel Walker says, was a mistake. Russia turned communist, severing ties with the West. Peter sought unity. Hope the US and Russia can co-lead as Yeltsin and early Putin dreamed.
Well, let's hope so. But can I just make one very quick historical observation? I contrary to what many people believe, the Bolsheviks did not think of themselves as distancing Russia from Europe. They were intending to engage Russia more deeply in Europe. They thought that, socialism would spread across Europe and that Russia, the Soviet Union, would be at the vanguard of it. There were many people in Russia before the revolution, including in the Russian foreign ministry. I'm talking the Imperial Russian foreign ministry, who said that Russia was involving itself too deeply in European affairs. The Bolsheviks disagreed with them. So, this is just a piece of history. I just wanted to say that it's something which, when we do return eventually to our historical discussions, we can explore in much, much more detail.
Commando Crossfire says, notice how the Russians met or called all their allies ahead of the summit: North Korea, Iran, China, India, even the West African Sahel states.
They were very methodical, as they always are. They're very, very careful to explain things and to do so in a public way. And you can see that all of their allies, all of their friends, were pleased to be called and appreciated the way that Putin, because it's mostly Putin, briefed them.
Nico says, Ukraine unfortunately did manage to do a big strike in Russia, hitting a drone factory in Volgograd. Other than that, though, did you notice that there were no sabotage operations by Ukraine? Even the drone numbers have fallen to less than 40 per day. Ukraine is depleted. They've used everything, which is why I hope Putin doesn't concede.
Well, he didn't concede. But coming to your point, Nikos, you may be interested to know that the FSB, which is Russia's counterintelligence service, a couple of days ago published a report saying that Ukraine's networks inside Russia itself have now basically collapsed. The Russian counterintelligence has got on top of them. And I thought that might happen, that all of these various attempts to launch this kind of dirty war inside Russia, what it has done is that it has exposed and compromised Ukraine's very carefully built up networks inside Russia. So that's probably one reason why less of this is happening now.
Iranian Kiddo says, can you provide a source that Pashinyan declared Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan before the 2020 war? As you said, I can't find any on the internet. It appears that he first hinted at Karabakh being part of Azerbaijan in 2023.
No, he did. He did actually say it before the war. I remember that it was talked about at the time, and the Russians were absolutely furious about this.
Putin
mentioned it. Absolutely. Perhaps there's been an attempt on the internet to clear up these things. Things like that do happen on the internet. I remember that I was trying to locate a speech made by Saif Gaddafi during the 2011 crisis, and I noticed that all references to it had been deleted from the internet. So things like that do happen, but there is absolutely no doubt at all that Pashinyan said it, and it was seen as undermining the whole negotiations.
Yeah. Nico says, since this is a chess game, how possible and what will happen if the U.S. puts nuclear and non-nuclear missiles in the Armenia-Azerbaijan corridor?
Well, I think that would be a massive provocation. I think if anything like that were even considered, both the Russians and the Iranians would very, very quickly find out about it, and they would take military action to stop it. I think that is an incredibly reckless and dangerous move, and I hope nobody's even thinking about anything as crazy as that in Washington.
Commander Crossfire says, wonder if Trump realized his casualty numbers were a tad off. Putin mentioned the 1,000 POWs Ukraine doesn't want back, probably because they don't have 1,000 Russian POWs.
Well, I wonder whether perhaps Belousov, who was, of course, the Russian defense minister, explained all that to the Americans. It is interesting. The Americans changed their delegation at the last moment. And I noticed that along with the Commerce Secretary, Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, came along after all. Originally, he wasn't going to go, but he did come. And I think it was a good thing that he came.
Yeah. Nico says, at last, Trump threw more oil in the fire by saying he suggested him a better voting system. I laughed. If that happened, that's just so badass.
Indeed, yes.
A great move by Putin
Yeah.
to talk about how the 2020 elections were rigged.
Yeah,
And if you were
absolutely.
president, this would have never happened.
Correct.
That's what Trump wanted to hear.
Absolutely, yes.
Putin gave it to him. What does Russia lose by saying
nothing,
that?
Nothing.
Raphael says, guys, outstanding job. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, Raphael,
Thank you.
all the support. Ed Byrne is a new member of the Duran community. Jim Highland, thank you for that super chat. Game of Chair says, what do you guys think about Lavrov arriving in a CCCP sweatshirt? Pretty funny.
He was funny, but he was clearly, as I said, trolling the Europeans and the Ukrainians too.
Yeah. Raphael says, after watching Putin yesterday, he was amazing. If he was a Lavrov as the president of Russia, not the right guy for the job at this very moment.
I mean, Lavrov is also a very, very clever man. I mean, all of them play their different roles, but you're absolutely right. I mean, Putin was, again, at his most masterly. But that was why he agreed to the summit in the first place. He knows that he's in a position of enormous strength. So that's why he says, look, this is the right moment to have this summit now. I can meet Trump. I could explain to the Americans what the situation is. And of course, by doing that, he appears masterly. It reflects the actual situation.
The Black Cat, thank you for that super sticker. Hammer88, welcome to the Duran community. Mama Alaska says, DJT must keep cards close to the chest, isolate the neocons.
Yes.
Very true. Zariel says, breaking all EU ambassadors to meet today. Yep, they're panicking. Yeah. Zariel.
They're absolutely panicking.
Absolutely panicking. Raphael says, I've been told the Mongolian rep, this is the last payment. Do not come back anymore. He came back. They disposed of him. Russia needs a man like him now. Thank you, Raphael, for that. PF Coop 1 says, President Putin, when are you going to stop killing the civilians? LOL, Western media. Yeah, the Western media. Just awful. They didn't care, though. Trump and Putin, they didn't care what the Western media was saying.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Palantir said, Putin gave Trump a nod by saying that the war wouldn't have started in 2002 if Trump was president. Do you think Trump will take the off-ramp?
Yes, I think he will. I think it is so obviously in his interests. And by the way, in America's interests too, just to make that absolutely clear. I mean, this is one issue. I mean, it often happens, but I mean, this is certainly one case where the political interests of America's president and the national interests of the United States exactly align. Why would the United States want the war to continue, to be defeated, to have a visible defeat, which would be a geopolitical catastrophe as well? I can't see the logic of that at all. And Trump, I think, understands this. And that's why I think he will take the off-ramp. And that's why I think ultimately he will prevail in the bureaucratic and diplomatic battles that are going to happen over the next couple of weeks in the United States.
Bottom line, they're losing the war.
Exactly.
That's just the bottom line. They've lost the war. And listen to everything that Orban is saying. Orban is saying the same exact thing. And he's telling Trump, he's posting it on X, let's take the off-ramp. Exactly. Those are the messages that Orban is putting out there.
Exactly.
Raphael says, Russia needs to comprehend that they have had a leader like Putin before. They lost to Japan and they had to surrender to Germany because of him.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Russia needs to comprehend that they have had a leader like Putin before. They lost to Japan. Oops.
Are you referring to Nicholas?
They had to surrender to Germany because of him.
If you're referring to Nicholas II, then in terms of personality, Putin and Nicholas are completely different people. I should say, I mean, I know that because I've studied Nicholas in great detail. In some ways, a very sympathetic man, highly intelligent, well-intentioned, well-informed, but he never dominated the political situation in Russia in the way that Putin does.
Yeah, Lord Kaidu, thank you for that super sticker. Elza says, when we see Zelensky in a suit, the war is over. Exactly. Chris M, thank you for that super chat. Carrie says, so are we heading for more wars around the world?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking in this live stream about a particular war, the one that's been played out in Ukraine. And, you know, it is a very important war. It's perhaps the most important war that we've seen in the 21st century up to now. And perhaps in some respects, the most important war, certainly since Vietnam, arguably since before Vietnam.
Lord Kaidu, thank you for that super chat. Ed Burns says, watching other streamers cover this live earlier, I was desperate for the Duran to come in with the facts. They were referencing Fox News, which was still spinning lie after lie. The deep state is in complete panic.
Well, that's right. I agree. I mean, again, it surprises me that these people who, you know, appear on the mainstream media don't look at what the parties actually say. Putin's press comments to the media are very clear. They leave no room for doubt at all. And if you take those in conjunction with the various things that Trump has been saying, both to Putin and in the press conference and to Hannity, well, it's quite obvious what's happened.
Yeah. Kev Jones, thank you for that super chat. Studio Lucent says Kellogg met with Lukashenko a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. But anyway, whatever. I wonder
Uh,
whether Kellogg will be there for much longer, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure Kellogg going to meet with Lukashenko was about trying to get Lukashenko to turn on
Agreed.
Russia. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Agreed.
Ed Burns says Mercuris loving the shoe cabinet.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Palantir says commentators like Brian have a cynical view. They would argue this summit was smoke and mirrors and Project Ukraine remains unchanged. What do you think regarding this perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, it may turn out that way. And of course, there are still lots of people in Washington who would want it to go that way. If that happens, then it's absolutely clear what the outcome is going to be. There will be a massive military defeat in Ukraine, a massive military defeat of the West, the United States, and of Ukraine, a huge Russian military victory as well. What many people were afraid of in advance of this meeting was that Putin would concede something and we'd end up with something like Minsk III. That's not going to happen. Putin made that absolutely clear in the politest way in his press conference, conference.
Yeah, and it's Istanbul Plus. It's from June 2024. There's going to be some people that are not happy with Istanbul Plus.
No, I know. Yeah.
That's fine. But the fact is that those are the terms that the Russian president and his entire team decided on, and those are the terms that are still on the table.
Exactly.
So that's the situation. Stefan Gavrila says, we all saw Trump can't impose to NATO, EU, and 404 a negotiated end. That is other than a Russian defeat. So where are we?
Well, if Trump cannot get the Europeans and the Ukrainians to understand that it is Istanbul plus or a Russian victory, then we're going to end up in a situation where Europe, Ukraine are going to experience that massive Russian victory and their own total defeat. At that point, the United States hopefully will have walked away. So that's the choice. If these people insist on a Russian defeat, even some of the most hardline commentators in Britain, the more intelligent ones, like Gideon Rachman in the Financial Times, are starting to realize that's never going to happen. Matthew Paris, another one in The Spectator, by the way.
Yeah. Christian Gidgina says, will Moldova be part of the deal like before?
Well, I doubt very much that they talked about Moldova over the course of this meeting. I think if they had done, Trump would have said, "What?" I mean, that would have been to introduce a completely different element into the whole discussion. The Russians are very concerned about Moldova, and there's been commentaries in the Russian media that precisely because the EU is going to lose in Ukraine, they're now going to double and triple and quadruple down on Moldova. So we could be looking at a further crisis further along the line, but we have to stick with what we're looking at the moment, which is Ukraine.
Jeffrey Brown says, wonderful. Did not expect this analysis when I popped by. God bless both of you for your hard work and humility of soul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeffrey. And from Principled Uncertainty, Del Amitri, we're wrong. Yes, most of the time nothing happens. Then it all happens at once. So be it. Let history happen. We have been stalled for too long. Thanks for saying true things, even when no one listened.
Well, thank you, first of all, for your very kind words. And by the way, you're absolutely correct. History often works like that, as no less a person than Lenin once said that there are whole decades when nothing happens. And then there's a single week when a decade of events might happen. And he was absolutely right.
Don Zucker says, Trump cheated on his SATs to get into UPenn. I don't know.
Well, I don't know anything about that. I mean, does it matter? I mean, does it really matter now?
Grugach 1001 said, will Lindsey Grahams, God smite America for talking to Putin as well as for not sending weapons to Israel?
Well, good question. I don't know where this leaves Lindsey Graham, actually. I mean, at the moment, it seems to me that he's up the creek and without a paddle, as we like to say in Britain. I mean, he's been using this threat of this massive sanctions and tariff bill to intimidate Trump into taking a hard line. And Trump instead has met with Putin and come to this understanding. By the way, that was, I understand, the Russian word. It was not agreement. Putin never said that Trump and Putin had agreed to something. He said we'd reached understandings, which is different. It's a more modulated word. Anyway, that's my own understanding of the actual meaning of the Russian word. If others think otherwise, please let me know. But anyway, Lindsey Graham, I think, he's not where he thought he would be 3-4 weeks ago. I mean, he's in a much weaker position now than he appeared to be then. I mean, for him to now come out publicly against this process would set him directly against Trump and MAGA, which will support this. They will all support this, as will people like Scott Bessent and the others within the administration.
Red Three Trees says, hope you're both well. Alexander, I know this is off topic, but what are your thoughts on Ricky Jones found not guilty after hundreds of people going to jail for social media posts?
Well, it is very off topic, and I think it's something I have to look at because I want to get more details about the case. But I think it's a very good sign, to be honest.
Commander Crossfire says, found it interesting that Mongolia was noted as one of the isolated Russian only friends with China, North Korea in the West. Media haven't heard much of, I can't make out that flag. In this
Mongolia
maybe in this context, yeah.
Yes, Mongolia and Russia are very old and very, very good friends, and they have been. I mean, they were very close friends during the Soviet era. Mongolia was the second communist state, by the way. It became communist during Lenin's time. It fought alongside the Soviet Union in the Second World War. In fact, most people don't know. And they remained friends afterwards. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they remained friends still. Mongolians and Russians get on. I used to know a British diplomat who was posted in Ulaanbaatar, the Mongolian capital, and he described it all to me.
Don Zucker says, Trump cheats at golf. This is a well-known fact.
And
I don't know.
Let's put it like this. I mean, I know very much about golf, but there's that famous game in Goldfinger where James Bond cheats at golf against Goldfinger, who of course is also cheating at golf. So I mean, if James Bond is prepared to do it, well, why not Donald Trump? That's what I would say.
Mark Hewitt says, will Trump take the chance to destroy the EU?
Well, I don't know that he's going to want to destroy the EU, but I don't think he likes the EU very much. And I think the EU is doing a pretty good job of working towards destroying itself.
Exactly. Ed Burns says, I got the impression today that Trump had an oh shit moment and realized that he should have got out of this on day one. Just like you guys have been saying, multipolarity is inevitable.
Yes.
True. Eric Hatchett says the Azov can sell their skills to Israel.
Hmm.
Chris M says Russia was the only European nation to not impose African slavery. I listen to you both literally every day.
Well,
Thank you, Chris, for that.
the Russians were absolutely not involved in the slave trade at any time. You're absolutely correct about that.
Yeah.
The orthodoxy is completely incompatible
Sure.
with it, just to say.
Game of Chair says, let's not forget that Victoria Nuland set this ball rolling. She should pay the price for the lives lost.
I entirely agree with you about that.
Laurie Cook says, thanks for helping me understand all the angles. The UK is showing their ass a lot these days. I hope Russia and the US maintain good relations because I trust Russia.
Agreed.
Thank you, Laurie, for that. The Palantir says, you can tell that Putin and Trump genuinely have a good personal relationship.
Yes.
Purely in terms of body language, you can see authentic cordiality. True.
Absolutely true. And, Putin very unusually exchanged words with Trump in English. Putin does speak English, but he never speaks English in public. So that is and for Putin to do that, that's a fairly intimate thing, and something that must have stunned Putin's security detail. He actually agreed to join Trump in Trump's limousine, the Beast, as it's often referred to. Now, that is extremely unusual.
Cameron says the West will never leave Russia, China, and Iran alone. They are forever enemies.
Well, there are lots of people in Russia who think that. There are lots of people in Russia who are very skeptical about any long-term rapprochement with the US. But, we're talking about the situation now and maybe for the next couple of years. What will happen beyond that is for the future. We have to look at the situation that we have today. And for the moment, it does look as if some kind of process of détente may be underway.
Stephen says, how do you guys think that face-saving flyover cost the U.S. taxpayer?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not going to try and guess that. I've no idea.
Laurie says, this is what I voted for. Very true.
I mean, can I just say about the flyover? I think that it was not intended as face-saving. I don't think it was intended to intimidate the Russians. I think it was a compliment. I think it was actually a compliment by the US administration, the US government, to Putin. I mean, when I saw it, that's how I saw it. I mean, the two presidents and the planes flying overhead. I think it was meant to show that, these are two important people and they're working together to make peace. That's how I read it. And I think that's how people in Russia will read it too.
John D says the legacy media acted like a bunch of jackals. It was embarrassing. Putin shouted something back, but you couldn't hear him over the nonsense.
You're completely right.
Very true. Rude Three Trees says, could you guys get Professor David Betts on to talk about civil war in the UK, please?
You are absolutely right, and we should certainly do that. And by the way, going back to that case that people were talking about, I now realize it's a completely different case from the one I was thinking of. Look, we will probably do a dedicated program to discuss these things. And certainly we need to have Professor Betts as well, who's made a big stir here in Britain as well. And that would be very interesting and a very good program. And we should also have Professor Parvini also as well, because things are beginning to happen in Britain.
Ledlis Adrian says, great changes are coming, just like the reorganizing of Alexander's bookcase. There is no doubt that Alex and Alexander are at the forefront of geopolitical analysis. If you don't believe me, then I can provide sources familiar with things.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you for that great super chat. Laurie Kusk says, does President Putin speak any English?
Yes, he does. He does speak English.
Yeah.
He didn't when he became president, but he sat down and studied and learned English.
Yeah.
I don't know how well he speaks it, but he does have an understanding of it. I actually know about this because I know one of the people who was actually tapped about lessons for Putin in English.
From Nikolai Shmelev, I was amazed how easy it was to remove the EU leaders from the picture. If you don't want to be chased by an obnoxious and dumb garden gnome. Just meet your buddy in some remote corner of the beautiful jungle. Well said. Well said. Hello there says, hi guys, looking forward to watching the history series again. To what extent did Rasputin's actions contribute to the Bolshevik revolutions?
Minimally, in my opinion. I mean,
Well,
absolutely minimally. Played virtually no role at all. He did perhaps, rather he was used as an excuse. Not, I mean, Lenin, the Bolsheviks weren't really very interested in him, but the liberals in Russia and some of the conservatives who didn't like Nicholas used the issue of Rasputin to try to discredit Nicholas. But in terms of the October Revolution, it played absolutely no real role at all.
Marco F.
Nothing
says,
nothing you hear about Rasputin is true, by the way, just to say.
Marco F. says, do you think that the U.S. generally wants to improve diplomatic relations and trade with Russia?
Yes. I think, well, say the United States, some people in the United States, Trump, probably some of the business people, the people in the oil and energy industry, other people.
Lord Kaidu 1347 says, I still fear the conflict will not conclude until the end of Trump's term in 2029, despite today's positive events.
Yeah, you may be right.
Laura G says, thank you for their attention to this matter. Thank you for that. Samuel Maroni says, Xi, Putin, Trump, and China together in September?
Well, we will see. I mean, I think that will be difficult. Of course, if it happens, then the Europeans will be even more alarmed. But I can't quite believe it, actually.
Yeah. Principled Uncertainty says, a Dr. Parvini episode to celebrate this slow return of common sense. You mentioned that, Alexander. Yeah, definitely. That's in the cards. Solaris says, I'm not too optimistic about this. Trump is not in charge.
Well, I mean, you have good cause not to be. I mean, Alex has already said, I mean, it's, you know, nothing happens until it happens. I mean, this is a step. It's not the journey. We still have a long way to go.
Sir Mug's Game says the greatest security guarantee for Ukraine is don't go to war with Russia. Simple but difficult to comprehend. Very true.
So very true.
Money Trek, thank you for that super sticker. Chris M says, please go on Judge Napolitano. Is a connection between you and them.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Super chat. Tom Cahill says the British crown has been defeated. Go Donald.
True, actually.
Laurie Kusk says Russian hoaxers can eat it. Thank you for that, Laurie. Mark Hewitt says someone I know lives near RAF Lakenheath. Planes carrying injured land at the base. The reaction of the British people when the death toll is revealed.
Indeed, that's a very good question. I mean, one day we will probably have the real explanation of many of the things that have been happening, including that one. But at the moment, of course, it's a taboo subject here.
Graham Crowley says, do you think sanctions will be loosened or lifted on Russia if Zelensky meets Putin in the next couple of weeks by Trump?
Who knows?
Klemena Atanasova, thank you for that super sticker. Klaus says, clearly Trump is listening to Putin. Note that Trump wants real peace talks, not a ceasefire.
Yes.
First time he said
Putin.
that.
Indeed, it's the first time he said that, and it's a massive shift. So he's listening to Putin, he's listening to Orban, he's listening to those sort of people. He's no longer listening to Kellogg.
Salim N says, what knock-on effects on Mideast from the summit?
That's an excellent question. I think this is something we need to talk about more deeply and think about more deeply. I think the Americans and the Russians start moving together on various things. Probably at some point they will start to work together about the Middle East as well. But at the moment, the situation in the Middle East is so bad that I think the Russians and the Americans have more on their plate with each other than they can. I mean, they don't have the bandwidth at the moment to come up with any move together to advance the situation in the Middle East. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see.
Iranian Kiddo says, I don't blame Nicholas for losing to Japan. Japanese Navy was a formidable force in 1905.
There's a huge story here. And can I just say, there's a lot of academic writing about the Russo-Japanese War, most of which has gone unpublished. I mean, I read 3 doctoral theses about this, which are unpublished. And there is, again, a lot of misunderstanding about the Russo-Japanese War and about its causes and its effects and about the way in which it was fought out, about the Japanese Navy being extremely advanced and very strong at the time. You are completely right. The land war, however, was not going so well for Japan. But look, this is a topic that, again, probably fits better within our history series than it does in this program.
Miguel Castilla says, Danish PM today, we must send more weapons to Ukraine.
Yes.
Of course. That's what she said. Of course.
Yeah.
Money Trek said, is this the real Putin? I mean, without the headset to communicate with security emergency if needed on U.S. soil. Remember, Trump wanted that as well. Something could have happened. A lot of people are saying this is not the real Putin, not the real Trump.
It is the real Putin.
Maybe not. Maybe it's all just a dream. Ed Burns says, just to say thank you for what you do. Prayers, gents. Thank you, Ed, for that. Sir Muggs Game says, Elon must be in his safe space, been shut out from Alaska and even worse, Moscow. Mm-hmm. Z12IT, thank you for that super chat. Chris M says, I'm a Mexican turn addict in Russian lover and into a Duran lover. Thank you, Chris, for that.
Thank you, Chris. My wife is currently in Mexico, just to say, and having a great time there too.
Nico says, can I just say how embarrassing the U.S. media were, from shouting questions, storming the conference room, and even saying that root causes are Putin's desire to recreate the Soviet Union? Are these people retarded or something? No, they're not something.
They're not
what
something.
You said, Nico.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Raphael says, before the Sandakan death march, a Japanese general asked the British general, we are done talking. Are you going to surrender now? Putin could learn from this general. Too much pageantries. Sir Musgame says, Alexandros means shield, protector of mankind. Alexei means shield, protector, and Andros means mankind. Here we have 2 of the finest examples. Thank you, Sir Musgame.
Sure enough. Yeah.
Elza says, Putin, Friday was 48 hours long. He went to Russia's east first, spent the day working, and looked great arriving in Alaska.
Yes, this is very typical of Putin. And again, the British media sneered at this, the fact that he had a stopover at Magadan and met, local people there. But of course, it is exactly what Putin does. Putin understands that in order to keep people with you, your people with you, you must continue to show that you are interested in them. Despite the fact that Putin is so involved in foreign policy, you never hear people in Russia saying that this is a president who's only interested in foreign policy and who isn't interested in us. And it's partly for that reason that Putin does this sort of thing.
Iranian Kiddo says, if pro golfers who play golf for a living cheat, we can't expect more from Trump. True, Iranian Kiddo. Lauren says, I think the U.S. are agreement incapable in the medium term. This is what history teaches.
Well, we'll see. I mean, you may be right. And can I just say something? If you are right, then in spite of that, this would still have been worthwhile, worth doing from Putin's point of view and from Russia's point of view, and indeed from Trump's point of view, because all of them collectively will have been trying to avoid what would have been a geopolitical disaster for the West and for the Russians, a victory which would cause them many, many problems in the long term.
Mark Hewitt says, how important is it that Vance takes over from Trump?
I think very important. And when I say takes over, that he becomes the successor.
The Palantir says, can you guys do a stream with Jay Dyer? He is extremely knowledgeable on geopolitics and especially in the history of espionage. Also, he is Orthodox.
Many people have suggested it, and perhaps we should think about doing it.
Well, we had a stream with him. It's been a while. We'll organize something again. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Laurie says, flyover was sign of respect and very cool, in my opinion.
Exactly. I thought the same. And I know that's how it was seen in Russia.
I agree. Yeah. Moon Dragon says, I think they should invite you guys the next time Putin and Trump have a summit. I agree with that.
Absolutely. Totally.
Don Zuger says Thomas Massey for president.
If people like us had been invited, there might have been a press conference where Putin and Trump might have been ready to answer some questions. Just to say, I don't just mean us, but other people from independent media as well.
Yeah, they didn't have a press conference because the journalists are they were just losing their minds. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
They would have asked dumb questions. Yeah. Don Zuger says Thomas Massey for president 2028. Matthew says surely the USA walks away now.
But one would
think. Yeah. Raphael says by prediction, Jeremy Corbyn's going to be the next prime minister.
Bold prediction. I'm not. I don't expect it, to be honest. I think more likely. Well, we'll see. But I think Farage will probably still outpoll Corbyn at this time. Yeah.
Nico says, guys, I am not even joking. I just opened my Steam account to play a game, and there's a Ukrainian Games Festival. These people have nothing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Nikos Iraq says, I can remember when being a reporter was a respectable occupation to have. Today, it's an occupation with no respect at all.
Or self-respect, it seems.
Okay. Principled Uncertainty says, Turgenev, if we wait for the moment when absolutely everything is ready, we shall never begin.
That's true.
Lawrence says, is there a realistic prospect of renewing arms limitation talks? Wouldn't that be a win-win?
I would hope so. Of course, Putin has floated that idea. I mean, I've been expressing alarm about the fact that the START treaty is due to expire in February and there's no replacement in sight. There's very little time. But anyway, we'll see. Hopefully something will come.
Iranian Kiddo says Russian animosity with the West goes back to at least the 17th century. Iran doesn't have historic animosity with the West. It only started when a group of radicals climbed up U.S. embassy walls in 1979.
Well, I think there's some truth in this. I mean, I would say that with Russian relations with the West, they've been a changeable story also. I mean, there's been times when Russian relations with the West have seemed quite good, or at least with parts of the West.
Yeah. From Ivan Yerasimovich, regards from Serbia. Hello to everyone in Serbia. XO Castle says, good morning from Oregon. Western leaders say Putin has repeatedly broken his word. What does this refer to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they never give up. They never give examples.
Just another narrative, yeah. Another spin. Ed Burns says, at Mercuris, I enjoy literature as much as the next guy. How do you have the collection behind you organized? Alphabetically or by genre?
No, by genre.
Iranian Kiddo says, Trump has not lost control at all. He knows exactly what he's doing. It's amazing to watch many people constantly struggle to blame the Lindsey Grahams of the world for Trump's own doings.
Well, I think he is in control. I think he showed this over the course of this summit meeting.
Ed Burns
I should say, Putin was masterly, but Trump had the situation under control also. The attempts to try in the media to try and ridicule Trump again are completely off target, in my opinion.
Ed Burns says, I've been drinking. I'm not going to lie. Thank you, Ed Burns. Commando Crossfire says, imagine if Medvedev was the one at the summit. That would have been interesting. Sir Musgame says, the Arctic is derived from the Greek Arctos, referring to the northern constellation of the bear. Thus, Russia has celestial rights to the place. Lieutenant General says, I am just loving the MSM meltdown. You should have watched the Sky News Live reporting. Dear me, childish.
I did watch it. I was up all night watching it, so I did watch it. I have to say, I almost choked myself laughing.
Jungle Jin says, Aliyev dismantling Soviet memorials. Why?
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's now going all out for the moment. For the moment, he probably shift back to taking an anti-Russian position. I suspect that having seen what's happened in Alaska, he's going to swerve again. Why he's doing it, relations between Azerbaijan and Russia have deteriorated. And I think we've been discussing why in many programs. As I said, the Russians cleaned up on the Azerbaijani networks inside Russia. And I think this has very, very badly upset Aliyev and the other important people in Azerbaijan's power structure.
Raphael says, all I know, if Kadyrov was the president, the war would have been over 2 years ago. France, England, and Germany would be as docile as a house cat.
I don't know about that. I mean, but Kadyrov himself has never said or hinted at anything like that.
Yeah. All right, Alexander, I think that's everything.
Well, that was an amazing live stream. Extraordinary
good roundup
days.
of things. Great
Yeah,
live
indeed.
Stream. Yeah.
Live stream.
And any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, you know, I think a lot of very astute things were said here. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, the next big event now is Zelensky turning up in Washington. Oh, my goodness. We'll see what happens. I predict he will not come in a suit, by the way.
I predict he will come a little better dressed than last time, but not in a suit. Yeah.
Not in a suit. Yeah.
Iranian Kiddo says Arctic is derived from Acticos.
Yeah.
All right, we're in for an interesting week ahead, Alexander.
Indeed.
From Denise Cervantes, Alexander, I saw the flyer over exactly as you did. I saw it as a salute to the two world leaders working towards peace.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you to everybody, and we will be back with videos later in the day. Take care.